And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Thursday, June 30th. I'm your host for today's program, and today we're going to go directly to Window Rock, Arizona and talk with Navajo Times newspaper correspondent Marley Shebala. We're going to talk a little bit about the passing of one of their law enforcement officers in their community and some of the festivals that are coming up there in that region over the 4th of July weekend. Welcome to the Native News Update. Marley Shebala from Window Rock, Arizona. Tell us a little bit about what the Navajo Times newspaper and staff are covering here this week.
Well, I looked on your website and it's become national news in Indian country and just across the country that the Navajo Nation lost one of its police officers.
Yes.
And that officer was Sergeant Darrell Curley, and he was 48 years old. And he was a real family man. Got out in the community. People knew him. Were getting a lot of letters to the editors, and also some national police organizations have donated to help his family. And they've opened up special bank accounts at the local banks around here for funeral services and funeral costs, which are very expensive. But the family is doing well from what we understand, of course, and under the circumstances.
Right.
The sergeant responded to a domestic violence call.
Right.
Involving two brothers. And sometimes people think, well, it's a domestic violence call. And they think, oh, it's between, a man and a woman, husband and wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. But this involved two brothers. And the father allegedly, while Sergeant Curley had taken one of the brothers into custody, shot at Sergeant Curley. Sergeant Curley returned fire. And the father is now in critical condition in a Flagstaff hospital. And the two brothers have been charged. All three of them have been charged with homicide.
Right, because they were all
so
involved.
It's gone into federal court. Yeah.
Right. Back up just a little bit. You're a little close today.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
I don't have a list, but I would imagine that if there was a list of Native and tribal officers, either on or off the reservation, that the list would not be real extensive. Like in the last century, maybe 15 officers. We know of some other officers who were just recognized just recently. I don't have the names on the top of my list, but our condolences to the family and the Navajo Nation for the loss of one of its officers. I understand he was a very fine officer.
Well, it's sad, but this kind of a tragedy once again is something that I don't know if it's across an Indian country, across the board in Indian country, but I have a feeling that it is. That a lot of the reservations have inadequate law enforcement. That because of that, the issues over the violence and the crime has escalated, especially domestic violence. And people don't understand how serious that can be, because it is domestic violence and it involves family members, and how the tide can just turn all of a sudden. The officer, I've heard so many times where an officer will respond to a domestic violence call involving two individuals, and next the two individuals who are fighting turn on the officer.
Right.
Or family members will come out and get out of hand very quickly, and it's very dangerous. And on the Navajo reservation, they don't have enough officers. And in this case, they did have a backup officer, but they didn't realize that they would be having to deal with three individuals.
Right. Well, it's sort of sad that here you had two brothers fighting, and then you had their father who came out with the gun shooting at the police officers. So it kind of shows a certain mentality about their, either their condition and state of mind or their position in relationship to law enforcement officers. And you badmouth them until you need them and until they need to save a family member, and they're going to go in there no matter what. If they found that same person in an accident, they probably would go through heroic efforts to make sure that they were safe and sound in a whole other situation or incident that might have occurred. So,
and you know what you're talking that people need to remember, because so often I think that the community members tend to place police officers in a very negative light. And I'm not saying that all police officers are, wonderful but a majority of them are, that I have had my experience with here on the Navajo reservation. And they put their lives on the line. People don't think about that. They don't realize that there's more violence out there. I mean, yes, there is more violence, and it's escalated. It's more severe. And last week I was at a meeting between the Navajo Nation Judicial Branch and the Tribal Behavioral Health Services, and they were talking about this. They were talking about violence. They were talking about domestic violence. They were talking about the Tribal Law and Order Act and how the tribes are to work with federal authorities. Repeating the tribes to help in the prosecution and conviction of these violent individuals. And there was a counselor who was there, and she had her master's degree in counseling. But yet she is going to lose her position because there's not enough funding for her. But she talked about her assessments and how an individual who has this history of violence, that the first question that you ask them is, who raised you? And begin from there to find out, because she said nobody just, all of a sudden wakes up and they have this anger management problem. It comes from someplace within them, and you need to find it to heal it. And what you're talking about, the father being involved in it, you're talking about a setting where it foster that kind of behavior. This type of violence that happens within within Indian country, we have to start looking at that. We have to start, realigning ourselves and remembering that each one of us comes from a very open society. I mean, it's based on ceremony. You don't go into a ceremony and sit there and then everybody starts praying for you. You're expected to tell everyone why you're having that ceremony. And you're very open, and everyone else is invited to be part of that conversation, part of that healing, part of that support, part of helping the family, the community heal. And that ceremony, everybody understood it, that if someone had gotten sick, that it affected not just that individual, it affected the family, it affected the community. And that's why everyone had to be involved. And we have to remember that type of thinking, because that's what was happening with domestic violence. People said, well, they didn't want to admit that was going on, so they would close the door on it.
Right. If there was somewhere that...
But you can't, it'll blow open. This is what happened.
Yeah. If there's someone who wants to make a donation, send a card to the family, or respond to this, where's the best place to send the card?
I know that right now probably the best bet would be to get hold of the Navajo Nation Police Department, and you can call area code 928 87. Oh, let's see here. You know what? I'm gonna ask people to go to our website, the NavajoTimes.com,
Sure.
And we will provide that information.
Sounds good.
And that way, people can make sure that their money goes where it should go.
Yeah. Has he had services yet?
No, not yet.
Is there a
it's
schedule
under investigation, so it's going to take a little bit longer. Generally, in Navajo way, when someone passes on, they have 4 days to be placed back to Mother Earth on the fourth day, and then 4 days afterwards,
Right.
There's certain things that happen.
Yeah. We'll keep our ear open for that because I know there's law enforcement officers in the region and sometimes tribal police officers. There was another event that occurred where tribal police officers traveled quite a distance to show up and come to their support to the services. So we'll keep an ear open for that. Marley, let's change the subject something. Give us something wonderful that's happened down here. It's festival season. There's fairs and powwows. What's going on in your area that people can look forward to and enjoy themselves at?
Well, one area out here is Monument Valley, and near Monument Valley is a community called Kienta. And they're going to be having a huge celebration on July 4th. They're going to have a powwow, rodeo, all kind of really nice family events. And it's kind of interesting because that's near, but Monument Valley is within driving distance, 15 miles from there. And as you drive to Kienta through the Navajo reservation, there'll be all kind of events that are occurring for community members. And here in Window Rock, they have the zoo, which will be open. But to let people know, it's very dry out here. They're telling people not to have fireworks, to be very careful if you're going to have that.
Right.
Actually, in New Mexico, there's this huge. I just read that Safeway stores has voluntarily pulled fireworks from their shelves on Wednesday.
Right.
And so people are just being told to be very, very careful.
That's a fire over by Los Alamos or something like that?
Yeah. There's actually 7 fires burning in New Mexico.
I want to be careful about that. Now, during this weekend, you can always get a good deal on jewelry in the Navajo Nation. You got your road vendors, but is it a time when you can have some specialty mutton recipes that people pull out their favorite ones and, make burritos and things like that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's one thing that you will find on reservation flea markets is you're going to always find the breakfast burritos, or you're going to find tamales, or you're going to find the I know people call them Indian tacos, but out here they're Navajo tacos, and the fry bread, and stew, and that you go to stop at any flea market and you'll find that there. You also find really great jewelry, and people sell the traditional clothing, or even the ribbon shirts,
Right.
all kind of things you'll find, and the flea markets out here are just so colorful, and you could smell the food, and it's just wonderful, and they have their fresh produce out there, so
If I was close by, I'd get in my car and I'd be down there. I'd spend the next week and a half down there riding around. We're out of time for today, Marley Shebala. Thank you for joining with us, and we're going to go to www.navajotimes.com, if I remember right.
yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
All right, well, good to hear from you and see you too, and you guys all have a safe weekend. Thank you. Yeah.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country. On this edition of the Native News Update, we want to say miigwech wen and pinigi for joining with us today. Come back again soon.